Our new definition of Islamophobia will prevent criticism of the hateful ideology of the theocratic Islam, say two of Britain's leading atheists in a new book of essays. Richard Dawkins and Peter Tatchell and other authors, including a former member of extremist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, say attempts to define Islamophobia risk curtailing freedom of speech. Peter Tatchell joins us now. Peter, good evening.
Good evening.
Now, you're against this definition. I don't think the government likes this definition that some MPs and others have come up with either, do they?
Yes, but the Conservative government probably dislikes the definition for different reasons than I do. And we're not saying it will threaten free speech. We're saying it could, because the definition is very poorly worded. Now, first of all, let me say that it is absolutely commendable that parliamentarians want action to protect Muslim people against prejudice, discrimination, and hate crime. That is totally right.
But aren't there laws for that anyway, Peter?
Well, there are laws, and this is the problem with the definition. The definition is responding to real persecution and victimization with the definition, when what we really need is action. Now, they cite, for example, the often prejudicial reporting of Muslim issues by sections of the press. And I agree that is a matter of concern. But that won't be changed by this definition. That will be changed by bearing down on newspapers that demonize and unfairly vilify Muslim people. If we want to challenge prejudice against Muslims, one place to start is in the education system, by ensuring that young kids are educated to understand different faiths, to understand the pros and cons of different faiths, but also to very clearly oppose any victimization of Muslim people.
So where
those are two practical things the government could have done, but they haven't.
But where, you know, there are laws now that say that being homophobic or being bigoted in any way is not on, quite rightly. And I don't understand at all how religious organizations, which after all are just a belief by some people, think they can actually get away with, well, you know, this is the same for Christians as well as Muslims here, think that they can actually look down their noses and feel superior about things and get away with being bigoted. I don't understand why we allow faith organizations to be so hateful in many cases. Not everybody, obviously, but there are quite a large amount of people who, because of their so-called faith, feel that they can be bigoted about people.
Well, you are right, and I think the problem with this definition is it focuses on an idea, Islam. It wants to curtail Islamophobia. Now, that is the fear or anxiety about an idea, whereas homophobia is about challenging the right, the existence, the human rights of LGBT people. So I don't like the term Islamophobia. It focuses on the idea of Islam, and I think there are valid criticisms about how some aspects of Islam treat or suggest that women and LGBT plus people should be treated. I prefer the term anti-Muslim prejudice because that focuses on Muslim people. And while it's right and proper and valid to criticize an idea, it's not valid to discriminate or treat badly a person, whether they're Muslim or Jewish, gay, black, whatever. This is where the parliamentary definition really falls down. It focuses on protecting an idea rather than Muslim people.
Do you think people... Sorry, I'm just going to say, do you think people who are not born here, who come to this country, but won't accept the fact that we are basically a secular country, should have to realize that, you know, you can follow any religion you like, you can do whatever you like, but there really is a great sort of public feeling against people going on and on about their religions in public?
Well, you know, the right to hold a belief is a fundamental human right. and it can only be legitimately restricted if that belief leads to expressions which, for example, threaten, menace, or harass another person, which, of course, some religionists do. They bear down on critics or people they oppose in a very vicious way. Or...
Not just Islam either.
Oh, no. Judaism and Christianity have their share of fundamentalists as well. But I think we also need to recognize that if we're going to have a free and fair society, we have to allow people to express criticisms of my ideas, your ideas, and Islamic ideas, as well as Christian and Judaist ones. And this definition could so easily be used to close down criticisms or debate. So I'll give you an example. In 1994, together with 5 of my colleagues from the LGBT plus group Outrage, we staged a protest against the extremist Muslim group Hizb ut-Tahrir. Now, most Muslim people do not support Hizb ut-Tahrir. They are very, very extreme. But they were saying things like that if a woman has sex outside of marriage, she should be executed. That if a gay person has sex, they should die. They were making very disparaging, hostile, threatening remarks about Jews and Hindus. So we felt we had to take a stand. So we went there to protest against them. And we were then accused of Islamophobia because we protested against their extremism. Now, this is the fear and anxiety about this definition the parliamentarians have come up against, that it will inhibit or maybe even ultimately lead to the prosecution of people who have valid, reasonable criticisms of some aspects of Islam. Well, it's not compatible with a free society.
No, in the same way that, criticism of religion was frowned upon until fairly recently. If you were to, criticise or take the mick out of the Archbishop of this, that or the other, you could land yourself in trouble. Luckily, we seem to have grown up and got over that. If people wish to have a belief, of course, that is a basic human right. Nobody can take your belief system away from you unless you start shouting about it and telling other people who don't believe the same as you that they're not nearly as good as you. And then maybe something can be done about it. But it seems to me at the moment, in the 21st century, that religions are trying to sort of draw the battle lines, if you like.
Yeah, they're saying...
And ordinary, moderate religious people are getting caught in the middle, aren't they?
That's right. And, of course, most Muslims would certainly not share the extremism of a group like Hizb ut-Tahrir. Yeah. In fact, that group, the people they persecute the most are other Muslims. So it's quite right that in the name of defending the Muslim community that we oppose the extremists who target other Muslims the most. This group also, incidentally, said if a Muslim person gives up their faith and turns to another religion, they should be executed.
They seem to like to execute almost anybody.
Yeah, well, this is monstrous. And yet it is so shocking that so many people on the left and liberal spectrum of opinion dare not criticize and take on these extremists. They're afraid of being accused of Islamophobia. And that curtails their criticism. And this is exactly why this definition is so potentially dangerous.
And, of course, a lot of people look at somebody who may be coming out of a mosque on a Friday or something like that because of the way the news maybe has been skewed a bit. But let's face it, there's been an enormous amount of Islamic terrorism around the world over the last 10 to 15 years. But people tend to look at every Muslim, or some people tend to look at every Muslim and think they're all terrorists, don't they? And that's the problem.
That is the problem, but this definition will not solve that. This is just virtue signaling. It's like, wearing their badge of whatever on their shirt sleeve, to say, look, we're against persecution of Muslims. It's great that you're against persecution of Muslims, but come up with a practical solution that will help the Muslim community, not a vague, potentially abusable definition like this. The other parts of the definition, it says, Islamophobia is rooted in racism. Well, first of all, neither Islam nor Muslims are a race. This is an idea, a religion. And, of course, there are people who adhere to Islam from many different races. It's not exclusively African or South Asian or Middle Eastern. There can be European Muslims as well, or Chinese Muslims, the Uyghur Muslims in China, the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. So this idea that it's connected to racism is nonsense. Now, of course, there are far-right people who target Muslims because they happen to be black or brown. That's true. But it's not ipso facto a race issue. And if you look at some of the Christian and Jewish extremists, they target Muslims, nothing to do with race, but because of their own religious point of view. They regard this other religion as being alien and a threat to their religion. The other aspect of the definition, which is odd, is it talks about Islam as an expression of Muslimness. So it talks about this concept of Muslimness, but it's not this definition. There's no definition of Muslimness. What is a Muslim and what is Muslimness? Even within Islam, the different sects have different interpretations. So Shia Muslims have different interpretations from Sunni Muslims, Sufi Muslims, or Ahmadi Muslims. So even Muslims themselves cannot agree on what constitutes Muslimness. Now,
do you think
there's a problem?
Do you think you will get the government to change this? I mean, the government don't like it for whatever reason either. Do you think this will be changed?
Well, no, sadly, I don't think it will in the short term unless we kick up a fuss. At the moment, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have embraced this definition, and I think it's not about thinking through what the definition actually means or how it could be abused. It's just them trying to parade their pro-Muslim sentiment. And this doesn't help Muslim people. Likewise, some police chiefs are adopting it. Many local authorities are adopting it.
So if, for argument's sake, Peter, somebody said, do you know, I really don't see why women have to dress up like in a black shroud with a little slit for their eyes. That's not the sort of thing that actually is accepted in this country of mostly secular people. And why would anybody, apart from somebody who wants to do somebody harm, keep their face covered up? Would that be under this definition? Would that be racist or?
Well, I would defend the right of women to dress how they wish. I don't think that a full burqa or niqab or even a hijab is, in any way compatible.
But I think covering the face up is unnecessary in our society, don't you? And I think it also says that we don't want to mix with you either. Unless you happen to be of our religion, we don't want to have anything to do with you. And I think that is a problem for everybody.
Well, as I say, I will defend the right of women to dress how they wish, including Muslim women. What I don't like is the pressure and compulsion that exists in many societies, and there are communities in Britain where Muslim women are under pressure from their families, their mosques, their communities to cover up, whether it be simply wearing a headscarf or wearing a niqab or a burqa. There is pressure, and very few people, including very few feminists, speak out and act to defend those women who are being unfairly intimidated into dressing in a way they don't want.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because they fear they're going to be accused of Islamophobia. They fear that if they speak out and defend the right of Muslim women to not wear the niqab, the burqa, or the hijab, they will be accused of being Islamophobic. And that's clearly not the case. If they're doing it from a women's rights perspective and not from a racist perspective of hating brown people or people of other faiths, then if it's from a feminist perspective, from a women's rights perspective, that is perfectly legitimate. That is not Islamophobic.
I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and I think this is an interesting point. There are a lot of women in this country who are subjugated in such a way by the menfolk. They're too frightened to say anything about it. The authorities are too frightened to get involved as well, for the reasons that we've already stated.
Yeah, there's a well-known group called Southall Black Sisters, which has been going for 40 years. It is of predominantly South Asian women of Muslim heritage, African heritage, Middle Eastern heritage. They have championed the rights of women within the Muslim, Hindu, and Sikh communities. And they have been denounced left, right, and center, even by some people so-called on the liberal left of politics as being Islamophobic, because they stand up to the patriarchy that is intrinsic in these religions. Now, in the case of Muslim women, they document many, many cases of Muslim women saying they were pressured by their families or their mosque or their communities to dress in a certain way to cover up in a traditional Islamic woman style. They don't want to, but they felt pressured. And when they haven't, some of them have been assaulted. Perhaps more have actually been abused or ostracized. But it's all wrong. It's wrong. Muslim women should be able to dress the way they want, including not having to cover up. And the problem we see on the liberal left of the spectrum is often they will defend the right of women to wear the hijab or the burqa or the niqab, but they won't defend the right of Muslim women to not wear it. That's the problem.